So I think we have our panel discussion coming up next in the agenda with executives from Strategic Procurement. Strategic Procurement is a division of Service New Brunswick, in case anyone wasn't aware about that. And our topic for their executives is myth-busting common procurement myths. So to guide us in our discussion today about public procurement myths, I am pleased to introduce our moderator, Bob Can. Bob is a category specialist with Strategic Procurement, and he has been working with the Goods and Services Sourcing team for almost 2 years. Bob buys for the IT professional services world and issues requests for proposals on behalf of his clients. Bob, over to you.
Thanks, Nicole. Very happy to be here. Today, we'll be shedding some light on common procurement myths. Now, before we get into the panel, I thought I would start by giving everyone a little background information about who we are at Strategic Procurement. A little bit of background and a little bit about what we do. At Strategic Procurement, we're responsible for buying goods and services on behalf of government departments, school districts, and regional health authorities. We're also responsible for procuring construction contracts for land, roads, and structures owned or administered by the Crown. Our role at Strategic Procurement is to ensure a fair, open, and transparent public procurement process. We have 3 sourcing teams. They work with our clients to ensure they get what they need in order to deliver programs and services to New Brunswick citizens. In the last fiscal year, April 1st, 2020 to March 31st, 2021, there were 5,624 purchase orders issued by the government of New Brunswick with a value of over $1.4 billion. This is goods, services, and construction for departments, school districts, and regional health authorities. Strategic Procurement is also responsible for the New Brunswick Opportunities Network, or NBON as many of you know it. This is where all public tendering opportunities are advertised. If you wish to bid on a government contract, you must be registered in NBON. It's a free service, and you can do so online at www.gnb.ca/NBON. Or if you would prefer to speak to a person, you can give our help desk a call, and Stefan or DME would be happy to assist you. It's very important to ensure you're properly registered in NBON to ensure you see the bidding opportunities that relate to what you sell. Now, to those tuning in for our live day, you're in luck because we have members of our sourcing and NBON teams here to speak to you today. So I encourage you to visit our booths in the trade show hall under NB Public Sector Entities. Now for our panel topic. There are a lot of assumptions and misconceptions out there about procurement, the processes that are followed, how bids are evaluated, how decisions are made, and how contracts are awarded. There are lots of rumors out there about how and why we do what we do. The truth of the matter is, there are a lot of rules public procurement officials need to follow. And these rules come from our legislation, policies, trade agreements. They operate under the principles of openness, fairness, and transparency. The rules we follow depend on several factors. Who's buying? Or in other words, what organization has the need? What are they buying? Is it a good, a service, construction? And the estimated dollar value of the procurement. Based on this information, procurement people like myself can devise a strategy with our client to get what we need. The strategy may be a public tender, maybe a sole source exemption. Maybe we'll obtain multiple quotes. All of this will depend on who's buying, what they're buying, and how much it costs. Now let's get to our panelists. First, we have Anik Godin-Bourque. Anik is Acting Executive Director of Strategic Procurement under the Health umbrella, serving both regional health authorities. Anik's health team is organized in 6 categories, and they ensure our hospitals have the right goods and services and equipment for patient care, including MRI machines, laboratory equipment, masks, and syringes, just to name a few. The health team also procures non-clinical goods and services for the hospitals like IT, snow, and waste removal. Anik previously held the role of Strategic Procurement Director and has over 15 years of experience in procurement, supply chain, strategic sourcing, and business in nonprofit, private, and public sector. Prior to joining public sector, Anik worked in private procurement with the Irving Group of companies. Second, we have Elizabeth. Elizabeth's team is responsible for procuring goods and services on behalf of the departments and school districts, and recently also took on construction services on behalf of the Department of Transportation. Elizabeth Dubé is my Executive Director of Sourcing and Infrastructure as well. Now, these categories include commodities such as IT, telecom, professional services, facilities, goods services, highways, buildings, construction. And Elizabeth has 20 years of progressive procurement experience, having held various roles with strategic procurement. She has a keen interest in people-focused leadership, innovative sourcing methods, negotiation, and client service delivery. Our third panelist is Celeste Savoie, Executive Director of Procurement Enablement. Celeste's team provides the strategy, policies, systems, and frameworks to support the sourcing teams and the wider GNB community, including municipalities, schools, universities, and crown corporations. Celeste was also responsible for the creation of the recently launched NB First procurement strategy, which aims to support local businesses in the public procurement process. Celeste has over 15 years of public sector procurement experience and an in-depth knowledge of both the practical and legal aspects of public procurement in New Brunswick, including trade agreements and legislation. So, now that you know who our panel is and what they do at Strategic Procurement, let's bust some myths. The first couple of questions relate to some myths we hear about contract awards. This first myth is for you, Celeste. The myth is, government awards most of its contracts to out-of-province vendors.
Thank you, Bob. And this is a common misperception, and it's one that I've heard very often. And it's often perpetuated in the media by highlighting a bad news story about a local company who lost out a big contract to an Ontario vendor, for example. And of course, that can happen. New Brunswick is party to domestic and international trade agreements, which prevent protectionist measures, and they allow vendors to be able to bid on contracts across the country, regardless of where they're located. And so sometimes this means an outside vendor is successful on a GNB contract. But the reality is, New Brunswick bidders are successful in obtaining government contracts. And I've got some stats, Bob, to back that up. So last year, 79% of all GNB procurement went to New Brunswick businesses. At the end of the second quarter of this year, this current year, so at the end of September, we're at 86% of all our procurement contracts being awarded to New Brunswick businesses. So that's huge. Despite these facts, I know that we do hear so much is going outside of the province, particularly to our neighbor in Quebec. I've heard that one a lot. The reality there only 2% was awarded to Quebec suppliers last year. So we know there's always more to do, and supporting New Brunswick suppliers continues to be a priority for us. Bob, you mentioned earlier about the New Brunswick First strategy. It's been mentioned a few times already this morning. That was launched in November of 2020. So we continue to implement measures and actions from that strategy to support our New Brunswick suppliers. This trade show is one of them. We have made some great strides, and we're seeing those results as those numbers would demonstrate. So I would encourage suppliers that are joining us today to check out our New Brunswick First presentations available in the lobby, and also on our website. So at www.gnb.ca/NBFirst, the New Brunswick First policy is there, the action plan. They're all there publicly available for everyone to see on the website, including those results. So those statistics that I was mentioning earlier. So all of that information is available on the web, and they're updated quarterly. So you'll get quarterly updates. And having those on the web, Bob, it's really important. It does two things. It keeps us accountable to our targets, publicizing how we're doing with our New Brunswick awards. And the other thing is hopefully it's helping to change the narrative and to dispel some of those myths and the myth that NB suppliers aren't successful. So it certainly is a myth, and they definitely are successful, and we hope they continue to be. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Celeste. The next myth involves equipment trials. We're going to go to a Nick for this. If I get a trial within this hospital, there's a guarantee they will buy my goods or equipment. It's the best way for me to get my foot in the door.
Thank you, Bob.
Merci, Bob.
Thanks for having me. It's really a pleasure to be here. Alors, pour nos participants,
So for our Francophone participants, I would like to answer this to this myth in French, so I'll repeat it. If I obtain a trial in a hospital, there's a guarantee that it will buy my goods and equipment. My best way to put the foot in the floor. I'll start by saying that this is a false statement. If the goods or equipment unless they're under an exemption under the public markets, they will be through the process of RFPs. If they should go through a similar process, and depending on the budgets that are available for the equipment in question, doctors through healthcare will want to try an equipment. But it depends on the plan of equipment. These are the health networks that manage the resources, and it's quite possible they're not available to support that purchase. So resources are limited and must be prioritized. That belongs to the health networks, and it can happen that the equipment has a software or something that the hospital infrastructure cannot support. Moreover, some trial demands are assessed and brought to an invitation, it's the IVT. And for a trial, there's no obligation to go through an invitation process to present, but we do it to maintain a level of equity for suppliers so that have similar equipment available on the market. I would like to finish by reminding you there's never a guarantee with a trial process, and the health network will, or that they will buy the equipment or service in question. Thank you, Anik.
For the next myth, how do you respond to government contracts always go to big companies? My small business has no chance.
Thanks, Bob. So it's certainly true that government does have some contracts with large companies. But in reality, the majority of our GMB contracts are actually awarded to smaller companies. We do recognize there is a need there to support small businesses, especially in rural areas of the province, who may be at a disadvantage in some cases when they're competing against big companies, often located in city centers. So one thing we have introduced as part, again, of our MB First procurement strategy, we have some measures there to help support smaller companies, specifically in rural New Brunswick. So one of those measures is the use of an economic development exemption. So this allows government departments to negotiate directly with businesses that are located in rural New Brunswick, so without having to compete nationally or even globally. And we've had great success with this exemption. It's enabled us to be able to buy locally. And last year, for example, we were able to award over $9 million worth of contracts to companies in rural New Brunswick. So that's $9 million that we were able to keep circulating within the province instead of it potentially going outside of the province. And this is for things that government needed to buy anyway. We need these things to operate. So we're very happy to have been able to buy these things locally and to support these rural communities at the same time.
Thank you very much, Celeste. Elizabeth, we'll go to you for the next one. How do you respond to awards are predetermined to favor the incumbent, and the incumbent always wins?
Thank you, Bob. So I can understand why some suppliers may feel this way, especially if they haven't ever navigated the bidding process before. It can seem daunting, and it can appear complicated, or that some vendors are awarded regularly. I would say that unless new vendors register on the MBON system or bid, we can't award to them. The procurement process in New Brunswick is led by Strategic Procurement at Service New Brunswick to ensure fairness and confirmation that awards are being based on the same requirements of the tenders. We see new vendors being successful all the time, and we are so excited to see this happen. Diversification in a competitive market is good. Another issue is that suppliers will often submit a bid that does not meet the product or equivalent requirement that's issued in the tender document. So in this case, unfortunately, we have to deem that bid non-compliant and not consider it. This pains us to do that. And as I said before, we have a duty of fairness and must award based on the tender document. Departments also review specifications before posting these tenders, and they often revise them based on their needs. I would advise suppliers not to assume that the results are always the same and to get out there and bid.
Elizabeth. And Nick, sometimes suppliers say awards are predetermined, so I'm not going to bother submitting a bid. How would you reply to that?
Thank you, Bob. J'aimerais aussi répondre à ce mythe en français. Alors, pour nos...
I would like to answer this in French. Suppliers say that the distribution of contracts are predetermined, so I won't submit it. That's a false statement that they're predetermined. We've just heard about that from Elizabeth, but I can understand that some suppliers could think that. Let me assure you that the RFPs or bid process is rigorous and allows transparency for suppliers. You can always submit the bid, and if you have the capacity to provide the goods and services or equipment and is under the objective of and when the delays are shortened, that means that the results are predetermined. It's not, it's just the predetermined trade agreements that we have to follow. It's according to the value submitted. It also happens on the health sector that some suppliers qualify or are withdrawn from the process because they predetermine or suppose that the professionals in healthcare have the specific equipment. There are processes in place and mechanisms that exist to ensure that the process is equitable. There are also situations that suppliers choose not to supply a bid because they think that an establishment have a bias. I can't tell you that that does not exist, but it does not influence the process of bids and the goods or supply of equipment are already in the market. In order to be able to ensure that the transparency is there, encourage the team project to try options to overcome these prejudices. I will terminate by saying that the evaluating team is quite surprised sometimes of the offers, and that's why it's important to always submit a bid on your behalf.
How do you respond to awards are determined based on political preferences?
Thank you, Bob. So I can understand the frustration that some vendors may have, but I can assure you that this is not how we award contracts at Service New-Brunswick. Strategic procurement, as I've said before, has a duty of fairness and responsibility to adhere to the Procurement Act, its regulation, the Crown Construction Contracts Act, and all the applicable trade agreements. The legislation clearly identifies that goods, services, and construction services above a specified dollar threshold must follow a bidding process. This requires that bids be evaluated only based on the tender requirements and not by any other influence or criteria. Our under threshold awards are considered low value, and where this is applicable, departments may award directly. Wherever possible, strategic procurement strives to issue public tenders to establish corporate contracts if there's sufficient demand across GNB and SNB.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Celeste. The next myth: government tenders are not well advertised and the systems are too complicated to use.
Thank you, Bob. So in terms of advertising our public tenders, Government of New Brunswick uses a web-based application. It's called the New Brunswick Opportunities Network, or NBON as we like to call it. So Bob, as you mentioned earlier, the NBON team, they have a booth here today at the trade show, and I encourage you to pop over and meet some of the team. Natasha, Pat, and Selge are all here today and looking forward to chatting with some of you. So please take advantage. So our NBON site is where suppliers can go to view notices for all public tenders. So for government departments, agencies, and the broader public sector. So that includes municipalities, NB Power, community colleges, universities, they're all posting on that site. So suppliers, this means by registering, you're going to have access to opportunities from over 315 organizations in the New Brunswick public sector. NBON, it's free to use. You can browse the notices without even registering, actually. However, I do encourage you to get registered as a supplier on the system. So by registering, again, it's free of charge. You'll be able to download tender packages. You can see the names of the suppliers who are also interested in the same tenders that you may be. And this can allow you to partner. If it's a larger project, you can see who else is interested and maybe work out a partnership to put in a bid together. You can set your product profile or service profile. You can sign up to receive notifications when a tender comes out that matches your profile. Another key feature of registering is the ability to bid electronically. And there's so many benefits of e-bidding. So automatic calculations of all your pricing, so reducing errors there of math errors. The ability to copy and paste. You can add attachments. You get a confirmation of bid receipt as soon as you send in your bid electronically. Also, by e-bidding, you're making the whole procurement process much faster. It's faster for us to evaluate, and it's faster to make the award, which is good for us and good for you. So I would encourage you, there's an on-demand training center here at the trade show today. There's videos there on how to e-bid, so take advantage of those resources as well. So for some of our lower dollar value procurements, the system, NBON, is actually acting as a database for us of potential suppliers. So it's that site that our sourcing staff are using to go in and invite suppliers to bid on tenders that maybe aren't publicly advertised, again, for those smaller purchases. So it's a great idea to be registered in there. And I should say too, for those of you who are already registered in NBON, and maybe you're thinking, I'm good, I'm already registered, it's a really good idea to go in and check your profile and make sure to make any necessary updates. So you may have a new line of business, a new product offering. We won't know about it unless you go in and you make those updates to your profile. If you have new contact, new employees, new contact information, please go in, make sure that's all up to date for us. NBON has a wonderful support team available to help you with any of this. Bob mentioned Stefan and Diami. They're our helpline folks. They're happy to assist you with any support that you may need. So in conjunction with NBON, there's another system that we use for our regional health authority procurements, and it's called Bonfire. So the solicitation notices, which you'll find in NBON, as I mentioned, they're going to have a link, and it's going to take you directly into the Bonfire application. And that's where you can submit your bid electronically for those RHA, those regional health authority procurements. There's a Bonfire help desk for any technical guidance that you may need. They're there to help. They have an online chat that you can use, or you can call or email. And submitting through Bonfire, just like submitting through NBON, it helps to reduce the risk of errors. So it'll check off any mandatory fields, for example, that you may have forgotten. If you forgot to fill something out, it's going to stop you. It's going to prompt you to go back and complete that section before proceeding. And my biggest piece of advice with both of these systems, and really any time that you're submitting a bid, don't wait until the last minute to begin. especially if you're e-bidding and you're not familiar with the process. If you encounter a technical issue or you have some questions, you might miss a deadline for the submission. So it's really, really important to start working on your submissions well ahead of the closing date and time, and make sure to reach out if you have questions. You never know when you may run into difficulty with technology, so don't wait until the last minute. Always ask for help. So I guess, Bob, I would just close by saying, please check out the booth and the on-demand training materials that we have. There's lots of training there. There's lots of demos. And of course, the wonderful staff that are available in the booth to chat with you guys today.
Thank you so much, Celeste. To add to that, you can reach out to one of us as well. If you get into the throes of a file, each one has a specialist like me to help guide you through that once you're there, and we are very much approachable and accessible, so don't hesitate to reach out. Elizabeth, we'll go back to you for the next. It's the government of New Brunswick's responsibility to provide me with opportunities to get experience with RFPs.
Thank you, Bob. So I see this as a shared responsibility between Service New Brunswick and its suppliers. Strategic Procurement continues to enhance its outreach to vendors, much like today. We are very proud of our online presence, including access to the New Brunswick Opportunities Network, like Celeste has mentioned, information on how to bid, and access to ask questions at any time. And I would also echo that we have a fabulous team at Service New Brunswick Strategic Procurement ready to help you at any time. I also strongly recommend that if you've submitted a bid and are unsuccessful, request a debrief so you can gain constructive feedback for next time. Even if you've been successful, I do strongly recommend that you request a debrief. It is extremely beneficial for the future. I would also encourage you to stay tuned for later today at 1 p.m. for my own RFP training session. This will give you an overview of the request for proposal process and provide relevant tips on how to respond to these RFPs. We understand the process can seem intimidating for sure, but with a few key tips, it can certainly simplify things for you. So please join me this afternoon so I can share more with you. I look forward to it.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. Nick, we'll go to you for the next one. Group Purchasing Organizations, GPO, Mohawk, Medbury, Ontario, makes the decisions for the healthcare sector in New Brunswick.
Thank you, Bob. Je vais aussi répondre à cette.
I'm going to answer this question in French. So the Group Purchasing Organization, GPO, Mohawk, Medbury, and Ontario, makes the decision for the health sector in New Brunswick. First, I'd like to explain to you what is a GPO, called GPO. For those who are not familiar with the term, so a GPO is an organization, group purchasing organization. In this case, it's a group of hospitals or health networks who want to optimize common purchases. The effect of purchasing in volumes is beneficial for many members. As for Mohawk Medbury's initiatives, or GPO New Brunswick, we have our word to say in the decisions taken for our province, as well as any other member of Mohawk Medbury. Mohawk Medbury is our GPO, and we pay a fee that allows us to have a lever for combined purchases. And this leverage issue generates a lot of advantages for health networks, such as preferential tariffs and contract management, knowledge of the industry, and good relationships with providers and access to expert clinics. Mohawk Medbury acts as a facilitator, managing the process for its members and ensure follow-up during the contract. As general rule, Mohawk Medbury commercializes consumable goods and sometimes some pieces of equipment that are tied to consumables. In all these initiatives on the market, New Brunswick has a possibility to sit down at the table from the beginning of the process. Mohawk Medbury operates with different committees. So there's a committee for pharmacy, a committee for imagery, and renal, represented the two committees for clinical material, one clinical, non-clinical. Whenever the committee, there's an opportunity for professionals in health from both the health networks to express their opinions, and an opportunity for Akeem and GPO internally to participate in the strategy development. Working groups, including members from the New Brunswick Health Authorities, are put in place at the beginning of each project so that decisions go through these channels. Initiatives going beyond this, the maximum by the public markets go through well, all furnishers can participate. Augment by utilize three different types of attribution strategies. So one that is unique, one is shared, and a regional distribution. Distribution is decided based on the assessment of all the members with a common goal. In spite of the large number of members in Ontario, New Brunswick always has a word to say in decisions taken. Same things, unless we exercise optional years on the contract. Mid-buy offers to each member of each GPO the opportunity to vote where the majority wins. And there are more voting members in Ontario than there are in New Brunswick. So this can give the impression that Ontario makes the decisions for New Brunswick. But I'd like to assure you that such is not the case.
Elizabeth, how do you respond to specifications are written for specific companies and or products?
Thanks again, Bob. So government departments are responsible for the development of specifications, and they simply are based on their needs. There are numerous occasions where new products or suppliers are awarded contracts. We see it every day. In many cases, it comes down to multiple suppliers who can provide the same product, and it's just at a different price. In other cases, there has been a specific product used by the department for many years, and there would be a significant change, impact, or risk to introduce something new. Unless there's a justified reason to name a specific product, there must be allowance for equivalent products to be submitted. When equivalencies are requested and submitted, vendors are required to show how their product is equivalent to these specs. It's so important to remember that we are only able to evaluate what we see in the bid and not make assumptions. That is so critical to remember. Please ensure you're providing sufficient information and that we do not have to assume. In terms of awarding to specific suppliers, I would say that while many suppliers remain successful in being awarded contracts, there are also many who are new to our landscape, and that excites us. Celeste cited some very interesting statistics earlier that we are seeing increases, and we will continue to see that. Change is happening, diversification is happening. I would also remind you that we cannot evaluate or award to suppliers who we don't know about. This means you need to get your bid into us. One of the main reasons we enjoy doing these trade shows is to solicit interest from other vendors in the community to want to do business with us. And then, of course, the obvious ability to provide outreach. So please put yourselves out there and try our bidding process. As we all know, everyone cannot be successful every time. So if it doesn't happen with one tender, request a debrief and please try again so we can keep an open and competitive market in New Brunswick. We want that.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. And to all of our panelists, Celeste and Nick, very much appreciate you taking the time to not only spend with us today, but also put together such informed answers for these questions. Now, I do believe we have some time for questions, so please do put them into the chat if you have any. And I do believe we have one already. Is that right, Nicole?
Sure is, Bob.
All right.
Bob, do you want to ask this question or do you want me to take it away?
Why don't you take it away?
All right, so I think this question might be a good question for Elizabeth or Celeste. So maybe both can provide your perspective on this question. So, is there a process in place to add offerings and brands to your existing supply offering before the contracts come up for annual renewal? So this is a question from the chat. So how do you guys respond?
So I think I'll get you to just repeat that one more time, Nicole.
Absolutely. So is there a process in place to add offerings and brands to your existing supply contract before the contracts come up for annual renewal? So I'm thinking you have a standing offer for chairs as an example. How do I get on that chairs list? Because you're only doing the RFP every 4 years, or whatever the case may be.
So I can take that one. So if I'm hearing accurately, you'd like to know if there's a process in place before the contract is up for renewal. And I would tell you that in most cases, our standing offer lists require you to bid and then propose all of your products or services that you're proposing at the time the tender goes out and you submit your bid. There are on occasion some lists that are based on a basket of goods or categories where we can add certain brands, and I'm thinking of office supplies and such, where the list is always expanding. And so depending on the list, yes, we have that provision, but more often than not, we need you to disclose the category generically sometimes, or more specifically, during the bidding process. So I hope I've sufficiently answered that, and if there's a precursor to that or such, just let me know.
Great. Thank you, Elizabeth. Celeste, I'm just going to ask you if you'd have any additional thoughts on that, or is that okay?
I would say Elizabeth covered that very, very well.
Awesome.
Thanks, Nicole.
Good stuff. Okay, so we don't have any more questions in the chat at this moment. So I actually thought of a couple questions for the team myself. So I'm just wondering if you would care to answer these for me. So I'm going to go to a Nick for this one. And Nick, you had talked about GPOs, so group purchasing organizations. And I'm curious, are there other GPOs that exist? You mentioned Mohawk MedBuy. So what else exists out there?
Yeah, sure, Nicole, I can answer that one. So in the healthcare sector in New Brunswick, as I mentioned, we do use Mohawk MedBuy as our GPO. Interesting fact, this GPO actually just purchased another GPO that we're a member of, and they're called CapSource, also known as St. Joe's. So this GPO goes out to market for various pieces of equipment for multiple hospitals. In other provinces in Canada, for example, they might use HealthPro. That's also another large GPO. So we do have options in Canada. For our broader public sector, Canoe Procurement Canada is used in municipalities in New Brunswick and in other provinces as well. They actually have a booth here at the trade show. So if you'd like to find out more about Canoe Procurement Canada and their opportunities, visit the trade show hall. They're under federal government and other Atlantic provinces. I've also heard of inter-university services and Kinetic GPO, which are used in some of the universities in New Brunswick. If you'd like more information on these companies, on our main page at www.gnb.ca/NBON, you can find which GPOs are used within New Brunswick public sector. Thank you. I hope that answers the question.
I think that's great. Thanks very much. We did receive another question from the chat. I think, Elizabeth, this might be a good one for you. What would you recommend to a provider who wants to present a new product or opportunity, even if an RFP has not been designed for it?
Thank you, Bob. That's a great question. We get asked that a fair bit. I know it can seem intricate or daunting to get out there and meet meet government departments. We do have access to point of contacts at the departments, or you may want to engage the department directly. I think it's very important that vendors seek out individuals who work in procurement or financial roles in the departments to solicit interest in their product. You can reach out to my sourcing staff, Nick's. We love to hear from our vendors to get some extra information on what's going on in the marketplace. So I think between reaching out directly to departments as well as strategic procurement, those would be the two best tips.
Thanks, Elizabeth. So I'm wondering if you could maybe share a little bit more about the Unsolicited Proposals Program, because I do know it is a program that we have that may help meet that need as well.
Happy to. So as part of the New Brunswick First Procurement Strategy and Action Plan, and I'm very, very proud of this initiative, an Unsolicited Proposals Program was launched, and this is very exciting. The purpose of this program is to allow companies to present unique and innovative products or service offerings to government for consideration. The program is particularly interested in receiving proposals related to government's current priorities or that address significant government problems or needs. Government will generally only consider unsolicited proposals where both the proposal and its proponent have unique attributes such that others could not deliver a similar proposal. I should also mention that there are no additional allocated funds for this program. It is simply intended for companies to create awareness for possible consideration, to get themselves out there, should government be in a position to purchase goods or services in the future from them. There are never any guarantees with this process, and this program will lead to partnerships or contracts with the government of New Brunswick. But it's still important to put yourself out there if you feel that you have something to offer. For more information on the program, I would invite you to check out the video in the On-Demand Procurement Training Center on the Unsolicited Proposals Program.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. One of the things that I will echo, and this is not necessarily part of it, but the education on all parts of how to do this on our end, how to do this on your end has grown exponentially in the last couple of years. So we are open for business, and the government in New Brunswick wants to welcome more and more vendors every single day. And Nicole and Celeste and various people on our teams have taken incredible strides to make this more accessible and easier to get in the door. So kudos to all of you for the hard work and recognizing that and pushing forward on it. That is an amazing step forward. So, and I believe we do have one final question.
Might have already been addressed, Bob, but we'll ask it anyway, just to see if
Sure.
there's anything the panelists want to
Sure.
add.
So this would be, how would a business with a unique but much needed service get on a list to provide these services?
Taking that, if you'd like to add, ladies, I would welcome you. So we've mentioned this, I think, in other responses and through some of the dialogue we've shared, but I think the first thing is you need to educate yourself on how to do business. So you need to go to the NBON system, you need to register, you need to tell us who you are. And when I say that, I mean by selecting a product profile. So tell us, there is a suite of commodities, a library of them, that will allow you to tell us what goods or services you provide. And in turn, that will match you with any tenders we go out for those specific products or services, and you'll be notified. So once you're notified, then visit the system, get in there, and download the opportunities, and then bid. So if you cannot bid, if you don't bid, you can't get on these lists because you can't be considered for evaluation. Some lists that we establish have a provision in it that once it's closed, once the tender is closed, that we would accept proposals or bids after the fact. Not every opportunity is this way, but I would welcome you to, even if something has closed, read those tender documents thoroughly and see if there are any provisions for that. Engage with our staff to see if there might be flexibility. In most cases, it is when it's closed and awarded, things are in place, but in terms of lists, there are sometimes opportunities for that. Nick, would you have anything to share from your end? Does that cover everything?
No, I think you've covered it quite well, Elizabeth. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We do have a question for Celeste. Do companies need to be located in New Brunswick to submit an unsolicited proposal?
Good question. The answer is no. We accept unsolicited proposals from any company. Of course, this program was established as part of our NB First strategy and action plan. With, our intent there was really to target New Brunswick suppliers to encourage them to submit those unsolicited proposals. But that being said, we will consider all proposals submitted regardless of where they may come from.
Great. Thank you, Celeste, for that. Et maintenant, nous avons une question en français. Et je vais...
Now we have a question in French, and I'm going to repeat it in English. So, are there any possibilities for the food banks?
Food like cheese. Panelists?
Je peux répondre à cette question.
I can answer that question. Precisely, we're working at the present time in looking at initiatives when it comes to New Brunswick First. And certainly we do have an exemption that is possible for local products. So certainly cheese could be included in there. I'm talking to the health sector mainly, and cheese is certainly one of the items that is used in the hospitals. So certainly, and soon I can tell you that there is going to be a publication that's going to come out for food. And like I mentioned, specifically, we're going to look at the foods that are produced for New Brunswick first. I don't know if you had anything to add, Celeste? Yes?
I'm just thinking of some other contracts or tenders that we would be familiar with for food and local food. And Elizabeth could speak to this too. It's her sourcing team that would put out tenders for this, but for the correctional institutions in the province, we do tender public tenders for those institutions and for all of their food needs. So of course, cheese would be part of that. That tender that we're looking for. So there's opportunities, like Nick said, in the hospitals. There's also opportunities in other provincial institutions. There's schools, cafeteria services. So there's no shortage of opportunities for folks to bid on food products, including cheese. If for the person that was asking that, I would also encourage you to stop in and have a chat at the booths, at the strategic procurement booths, and you can have a chat with the sourcing specialists that are available there today, and they can maybe give you some more details about maybe timing or when those tenders might be coming out and give you a bit more detail on that.
Great, thanks team. Bob, I think you have the next one.
Yes. Okay. So we're going to a Nick for this. For medical devices, in particular, things like ceiling lifts for safe patient handling or hospital beds, how do companies register on Bonfire?
Actually, there's a helpline right on Bonfire, and they can walk you through the steps of how to get registered if you're a supplier and you want to participate in any initiative. Because for the healthcare sector, as Celeste mentioned earlier, everything goes through NBON, but then there's a link that's included to take you to Bonfire, because all of our e-bidding is done through that platform. So if you just go right on Bonfire, there is certainly some steps there that can help you register as a supplier. And if you require any further information on how to get set up, you can certainly contact any of us.
Thank you very much, Nick. Another question from the chat, and keep them coming. We appreciate you sending these in. Who can a provider ask to find out when the expiry date is for a current contract that'll lead to the next RFP?
I can take that question from certainly from the health side. You can reach out to, you can go on our Service New Brunswick site under Strategic Procurement. All of our contacts are included there. So we would be identified by category. So you could reach out to either the manager or the director, or even myself as the executive director, and I can point you in the right direction to find out when the contract is expiring. I don't know if there's anything else that you ladies would like to add.
I would echo the same comments from you and Nick. It's the same approach for my team for part 1 and 2 of government. So definitely engage with strategic procurement. We are very visible on the New Brunswick Opportunities Network. So please reach out to us and we'd be happy to get you that information.
Thank you very much. Celeste, you mentioned some statistics about our results regarding NB bidders. Said that in 2020, overall, 79% of procurement awards went to NB businesses. Now, that's a great number. Is there any up-to-date statistics for this year that you can share?
Yes, there is. So we just released our second quarter results for this fiscal year. So that being up until the end of September. So just in that quarter, we awarded 89% of all procurements to New Brunswick suppliers. That's huge. As I mentioned before, it's great results. If we compared it to the second quarter, like same time frame last year, we were at 75%. So that's a massive jump when you just look at the comparison. So that just goes to all the work that we've been doing and all of the support that we're getting from the staff are on board, the clients are on board with this MB First culture change and philosophy that we're moving towards. So yeah, and as I mentioned earlier, we have that website, so gmb.ca/nbfirst, and you can go there and view those results. So every quarter it gets updated, so you can actually go and have a look at how we're doing against our targets.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Celeste. So the next question is for Nick, and this is a follow-up to the bonfire question that we had a little bit earlier. So are ceiling lifts a category? Within Mohawk Medbuy, we received the following response. We currently do not have a patient lift category that we work on. This would most likely fall under capital, and capital is not within our normal scope of work, although we will do an initiative if several hospitals request it. How do we have categories listed? And if you want me to repeat that question, I'd be happy to repeat it.
Yes, I would ask that you repeat it. Thank you.
So our ceiling lifts a category. First and foremost, our ceiling lifts a category because a supplier that has asked the chat has said that they've received the following response from Mohawk, that they currently do not have a patient lift category that they work on, and that the company is saying that this would fall under capital, and capital is not within a normal scope of work, although we will do an initiative if several hospitals request it. So I think this supplier is trying to see if there is enough, need for that in Mohawk, perhaps.
So what I would answer to that question is that I've mentioned it earlier. Mohawk Medbuy is a GPO typically for consumables. So they sometimes go to market for smaller pieces of equipment, but those equipment are tied to the consumable. So when we're talking about ceiling lifts, these are actually large pieces of equipment, and we would go out for those ourselves and within strategic procurement. We would sometimes use CapSource, which is the other GPO I mentioned earlier. CapSource, we're also a member of that, and they do go out for equipment. Typically, ceiling lifts is something that we would do ourselves, and what I would recommend there is just again to look on MBON to see if there are any opportunities for requests for proposals for ceiling lifts.
Great.
I hope that answers the question.
Thanks, Nick. And if in the chat if you have a further follow-up question to that, please don't hesitate to type that in for us. And this is another question actually for you and Nick. So I'm a producer of healthcare products and I want to establish a company in New Brunswick, but I need to know if the government of New Brunswick has interest for my products. Who do I contact?
That's a really good question. I think obviously we can start the conversation if you want to reach out to me, and we can start the conversation, and then I can point you in the right direction based on the director's portfolios or even one of the category managers. So depending on exactly what you're looking for, I can certainly point you in the right direction.
Thank you very much. To all the panel, are hospitals, schools, universities interested in organic, healthy food products in the procurement process?
I can speak maybe a little bit, and maybe you can add on the hospital piece. I know we have worked a lot with schools in their cafeteria, food service procurement needs, and I know they have a healthy foods policy that they use in school. So I would suggest, and I don't mean to be speaking on their behalf by any means, but to me, I would suggest they would certainly be interested in any type of healthy local food product that they can get into the schools.
I would actually add to that in regards to the hospitals. Obviously, I can't speak on their behalf, but what I would say is to obviously look out for any initiatives that are being posted for food initiatives, and certainly I'm sure that they would love to see your proposal.
And I would only add to that I think if you do have something unique, we mentioned the unsolicited proposals program. If you have something that is unique and not duplicated in the industry, then I would encourage you to use that as well. My counterparts in the education system are always open to innovative ideas and healthier approaches. So I don't mind you reaching out to me as well for part 1 and 2. If I can connect you with someone in the system, I'd be happy to do that.
Very much. Elizabeth, earlier you busted the myth that specifications are written for specific companies or products. And you mentioned that unless there's a justified reason to name a specific product, there must be allowance for equivalent products. But what do suppliers do if they have a new or innovative product to show us? Do you have some sort of program for unsolicited proposals like some jurisdictions do? Yes.
Yes. So we do, and I've mentioned this before, and I'll reiterate it again, though. I think it's very, very important that if you do have a unique or innovative or both offering, that you do engage us through the unsolicited proposals program. It's there for a reason. There are no guarantees that you will be selected through it, but we need to know that you have a product and that you're there, and so that is one outlet for you. Again, you can always reach out to us. So we have vendors all the time, either through this type of an event or just a simple cold call to reach out to us and say, we have this product, we can't connect with anyone, can you help us? So I had also mentioned that there are lower threshold purchases that sometimes we have flexibility to not go to tender, and departments can purchase directly. And so sometimes when you have a new product, even just to bring it in as a trial, we might be able to purchase something under threshold to get your foot in the door. And I know that you're probably aspiring for something of more significant dollar value, but we also want a chance to be able to test and trial and mitigate some risk of, what could happen if we implement it on a longer term. And I've seen lots of opportunities present as a result of suppliers who have simply met with us and introduced products, and we purchased a small volume just to give it a chance and also give you an opportunity to do business with us and experience that as well. So I hope that sufficiently answers the question.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. And I do think that's a very important thing to highlight. We have found ourselves in a time that has bred tremendous innovation, and that shouldn't go unnoticed or unfounded. So it's important for everyone who is innovating or just unsure of how to do that to be able to connect with us and put their amazing innovations to use. We do have one more question. The info documents provided suggest that for goods and services under a certain threshold, companies should approach relevant departments directly. Can you provide any guidance on how to find the right people within these departments?
So I can start, and certainly Celeste or Nick, if you'd like to add. So I'll be honest with you, I recognize that sometimes it's hard to find those individuals. We do have a list of procurement coordinators that exist in each department, and so we maintain a very active list. It's updated regularly and fluidly. So you can reach out to us as a first point of contact. And of course, I don't want to speak again on behalf of departments, but I can tell you that I know my counterparts are always happy to speak to suppliers. Of course, be patient with us. Sometimes we have to manage that with the day-to-day priorities that come up. But if you'd like to reach out to us, we do have points of contact. Generally, these individuals that you would connect with originally would be more in the corporate services area of departments, and then you might be referred to someone more in the subject matter area of the operations. So that would be for my clients. Celeste or Nick, do you have anything to add?
I can actually go for part three. So I would echo Elizabeth's comments. We may not have necessarily procurement coordinators, but certainly we have clinicians and people on the floor that would be interested to speak with you. So I would recommend the same thing. If you don't know exactly who to contact, you can certainly reach out to us in Strategic Procurement, and we can guide you in the right direction.
Great, thank you both. We have another question in the chat, and we are getting near to our time. So if that question that you're holding on to, please get it in the chat now. So I think this is a good question for Elizabeth. There are alternatives available for software products used by the province. An alternative to Citrix, and I apologize, Citrix, thanks Bob, for example, Citrix. However, current contracts appear to be renewed without going to procurement, or when they do, they just ask vendors to bid on a renewal of the existing product rather than seeking alternatives. So how does a new vendor get into the mix?
So that's an excellent question, and I'm happy that you explicitly called out a certain situation. It gives me some perspective. So I would tell you, and I did mention it earlier in the responses to one of my questions, that sometimes we do have legacy situations that merit or require us to use a specific brand, or in this case, a technology solution, in order to meet a need. You can imagine, in the size of the civil service and the size of government, the intricacies and the depth of the requirements that we have in terms of our telecom and technology solutions. And it can take years in order to create that full end solution. So in the case of Citrix, I would just say that if, or any solution for that matter that you have, the unsolicited proposals program is one, but it's also important to reach out to the counterparts directly at either at any part of Service New Brunswick through parts 1 and 3. So we do put solicitations out, or not, or continue directly with a certain solution for often a business reason, and that often comes down to technology risk, or that we are doing research in order to be able to advance our efforts in the future. So don't assume that if you see us continuing with a certain solution that we're not open to something in the future. We need to know about you. We need to know the dynamics and the specifications of what you propose. So put yourself out there. And I'm sure in this case, you may feel that you have in the past. You should continue to do that, because government has gone through major transformation through COVID. There have been significant delays in us being able to work on other priorities while we're focused on saving lives and meeting the needs of New Brunswickers during this very difficult time. So I would recommend that the vendor who's proposing this keep pushing through, keep proposing what you have, and it is not going unheard. And so I would welcome you also to reach out to me if you have something to share.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. Now, we do have a follow-up for the innovation question. Celeste, this will go to you. If a vendor goes through the process to present a product to the government that meets a lower threshold and the client likes it, how then do they purchase additional in larger capacity without going to a public tender where alternative products could meet the minimum specs, or would not meet the minimum specs, rather?
So if I understand correctly, we've tried a product at a lower threshold, and now we like it and we want to buy more. How do we buy more? So there are a few different ways that we can do that, depending on the exact scenario. So there are some exemptions that exist in the Procurement Act and regulation that allow us in certain situations to bypass a public tender process, which would normally be required if something is at the higher dollar threshold, right? We would have to go to public tender. So just because we've tried something and we like it doesn't, preclude us from having to go to public tender unless there's an exemption that fits the scenario that we're in. So there are exemptions for sole source products. So if it's a product where there is no alternative, there's no other, it's very unique, and this is the only product that can meet our demand, then we're able to make a case that we can award directly to this vendor for this particular product. Aside from that, if it does exceed that threshold that we're required to publicly tender, we would have to put it out. We would have to go out to public tender, and we would say we're looking for some product that can, meet these specific outcomes or fit these specific requirements that we have. And then, of course, that vendor would be able to bid on it, and so would any other supplier that may have something similar. So those are really the two approaches that we have. Is either put it out to tender, or if we're confident that this is in fact the only product that can do what we need, then we can use that exemption that exists in order to negotiate a larger contract with them.
Great. Thank you very much, Celeste. So I think that ends our questions. We don't have any more in the chat I see here. So thank you very much, Bob, all of our panelists. You guys did an awesome job. I was really, really impressed with these great answers. So thank you very much for this excellent discussion. I know when we traveled around the province in 2019, I heard many of these misconceptions. And it's nice to hear them finally busted once and for all. So our next session is going to be beginning at 11:30. So you've got about 12 minutes to maybe grab a coffee, do a little stretch break. At 11:30, we have Danny Arsenault from Procurement Assistance Canada, who will talk to us about doing business with the federal government. So until then, you can walk around the trade show hall virtually, take a stretch, grab a coffee or a snack, and don't forget that those booth representatives are waiting to talk with you, and they have lots of great information to share. So as a final plug to our procurement training center, for more information on the public procurement process in New Brunswick, I really encourage you to watch the video Selling to GNB, and there's lots of great NBON training videos as well. I do apologize, you may get sick of my voice, but you have to learn somehow, right? So enjoy your break, and we'll see you at 11:30.